All right, welcome to the Spartan Canada Podcast. I'm Jill Sargent, an SGX coach, and I am here with Bethany McChesney, who is all the way from Strathroy, Ontario. We have Bethany as one of our elite racers in Canada. She is a hybrid, she's OCR, she does it all. She runs her own business as a coach and has her own gym, and she's also a DEKA World Champion. So this is going to be a great episode. I'm super excited to talk to Beth. Without further ado, how are you feeling after this weekend's race, Bethany?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling worse though than I thought I might be feeling. We were kind of briefly chatting just before, but Brimacombe is one of those races where it's not one of these monstrous mountains that we race. Even Blue Mountain is a significant mountain. And my running felt just really smooth on Saturday. So even during the race, I was like, wow, like I think I really prepared finally properly for this race. And, I'm probably going to be good to go. And Sunday afternoon, so the day after the race, I woke up like hobbling. I'm like, oh my goodness, like the for what it is for me though is we don't have hills where I live. I'm like flat as a pancake, small town, surrounded by farmers fields basically. So I do not have elevation in my runs. So I always know that the elevation is going to beat me up a little bit, but I could not believe the pain that I was in the next day and the day after that, just the calves and even the tibia anteriors from the downhills. And I did do a little bit of a different prep this year as far as what I was doing in the gym for just handling the eccentric loading of the downhill. So I did notice that in the race that my body handled that a little bit better. But yeah, the usual bumps and bruises, I suppose, of just, the walls and like the chicken winging, the 6 foot wall and stuff like that. So but yeah, all in all, I have recovered fairly well, but there's always that kind of shock the next morning of, oh yeah, I raced
And
yesterday.
it's funny, we were talking about this ahead of time, but you're there and you're completely trained, you know what you're doing. You're only doing each obstacle once. So it's like you wake up in the morning and you can't move, and you're like, I've done these workouts. It's just such a
Mhm.
different thing to put your body through
Yeah.
and physically. And you're not thinking there's so much adrenaline. You're not thinking
Mhm.
going over a wall, oh, I'm chicken winging and I just have a massive bruise on my arm now. You don't
Yeah.
feel that. So
Racing is so interesting that way. And I think too, even just doing things that extra speed faster just hits different muscle fibers. That's different than in training. And that's really what tears you up, I think. And even things like barbed wire crawl. I had some massive gashes in my back. And me and a couple of the girls that I was around at the time were joking about my barbed wire crawl, but I had just failed an obstacle and then I used the barbed wire crawl to catch back up.
oh,
And
nice.
so I was in that mode where you're kind of panicking, okay, got to get caught back up. And I tore my back up and
Oh
I didn't
no.
hit it at all. And I like ripped my pouch and like I tore one of my gels and like I noticed none of it. And racing is just so weird that way. You get so zoned in and just focused on the task and doing it as fast as you can that you don't notice anything, and then you get in the shower after and it's like, wow, where are those scrapes?
I
That
know.
really hurt.
Where did those come from? Yeah, I notice when I'm running, I will in the background almost feel that. Like I'll feel, oh, I just ripped something, like I just got a big scratch, but you don't feel it. You know it happened. And then
Yeah,
later on, you're like, oh my goodness. So
yeah.
how do you then, you're also a coach. That's your background. How did you prepare your legs for the hills? And what do you do? Because you're quite successful as a hill runner. So how do you make yourself successful? How do you make those legs not cramp out?
Yeah, that's a really good question because that's the thing really that is probably the biggest challenge for me coming from flat Southern Ontario and loving mountain racing. I've always so I came from a cross country background. I ran varsity cross country for the University of Western. And even when I was in university and I ran cross country competitively, I was kind of known as the girl that could run hills. So it could be, you know, the short legs, powerful legs. I came from a hockey background before that. So I think like I have leg power, and I
Mm,
did a bit of triathlon before that. So from cycling. So the uphills has always been a strength of mine. So I find that's less of a concern. I think with the uphills, you can simulate that a lot better in the gym with your lunges and power building and the single leg stuff. But it's the eccentric loading of the downhill that's really hard to simulate if you're not running on that eccentric slope and that braking mechanism that really tears up your quads. And I find if you're in a race and you're really racing and you're bombing down a mountain and then you turn around and you head back up, that's when you realize the damage that kind of happened on that braking mechanism. And that's when, if I'm going to cramp up, it's I turn around, I go back up, and then all of a sudden my quads are like, no, I
that,
really didn't like that. So
yeah.
yeah, so it's mimicking that eccentric loading.
Mm,
And there's different ways you can do this in the gym. The volume of it though is a trick. And even so box jump downs, so kind of the repetitive jumping down. And then I do so much single leg work, single leg deadlift, single leg lunges, you know, single leg hopping up and over things. Um, I do like a slant board work where it's really focusing around the knee, and eccentric loading around the knee. Yeah, just a ton of stuff with that eccentric loading around the knee joints, where even in positions again with the slant board with the toe pointing down, because that's
okay.
where you're really going to feel it when you're running down, and even the toe is dropping down along the slope of the mountain.
So is that like a balance board then that you're using to push your toes, like push that
So
down? Or
there I have slant boards, so they slant down and you stand on them.
perfect.
If you've ever heard of what cyclist squats are, so your toes are actually pointed down on purpose. So stuff like that where it turns the toe down. And so I've added a lot of stuff into this season, just in the couple months before, doing it really frequently to just see if I could feel really good
About that
in
part.
this. Yeah, in that part. And I felt really good actually on the downhills and just being able to control myself. So it could have been maybe the difference maker. My running felt really good in Brimacombe this year.
Good.
And yeah, I failed a couple obstacles and was able to kind of run myself back into it.
Which
So
is
yeah.
so awesome. I heard you actually
Mhm.
say in a story on Instagram that it's a highly runnable course, Brimacombe is. So tell me a little bit about that. How did you find the course this year and your running versus your running style? What did you like about it? Tell me all about it.
Yeah, Brimacombe is has the most long sections where you're actually running of
Mm,
most Spartan races that I've ever done. When you get out to the races in Kelowna, even Blue Mountain, there's a lot of vertical and steep vertical and even sections where it's hands and feet and you're scrambling. Tremblant is also notorious for like a really treacherous scrambling, so you don't really feel like you're running. And then you hit these sections sometimes like in Tremblant where you actually get to run and it's like, oh my goodness, this feels so good. But Brimacombe, it's extremely runnable.
mm,
Even the sections that are a little bit more technical are still very, very runnable. The mountain is not very big. You can kind of do power hiking mixed with running. The very few sections are super steep. So this course ran backwards of the last few years.
mm.
There's this section around the lake that the last few years we've done that at the end and then come up into the finish line, and we ran this in reverse. So the beginning portion was that single track flat running, which was so nice, and it kind of spread out the field a little bit from the
Yeah.
start.
So how did that
Mhm.
work in your race? Tell me how that went? I know there's a top three. We had a ton of women. We'll get into that too. It was great, the competitive. But did the top three or top five break away with you, or were you out there all alone the whole time?
Yeah, well, it was interesting this year, and it was very much 2017. I don't know how many people that are listening have been around this long, but 2017 was my very first Spartan race, and we went up straight up the mountain and straight back down. And I went out way, way too hot coming from a track runner's background where you just, you know, you go out at 5K
Wow.
pace because I was racing a sprint.
Mhm.
And and then you bomb back down the mountain. And then, so this was the same situation where we went up the mountain, down the mountain, and then we had this really runnable section. And so I went out, and there wasn't a woman with me for the
Okay.
first while, until the first real obstacle was monkey bars. There was a wall at the top, but that's kind of
Yeah.
it is what it is.
Just to slow
So
down.
yeah, exactly. It's kind of like a second to catch your breath and
Mm.
regroup. So the first obstacle after a little bit of single track was the monkey bars. And at that point, there wasn't another woman that I could see. So I had failed the monkey bars. I actually grabbed the last bar and I whiffed on the bell,
Oh,
and
that's the
which is one
worst.
of those, oh my goodness. And
Yeah.
I kind of let out a really loud swear word, and the
Yeah.
the volunteer was like, "It's okay, just do the loop." I'm like, "I know, I was just right there." So I whiffed on the bell, and I actually, like, really messed up my pinky, and again, I didn't
Oh
feel it at
no.
all. I was so angry, but it was just,
Yeah.
I hit the bar instead of the bell, and just one of those stupid, mistakes that you make. So by the time I
Yeah.
had finished the run loop, Elise, had finished the monkey bars, so that
Okay.
was the lead that I had, at that point. So
Which is not
then
very far because I mean, what was that, 200 meters maybe of running? And for you, you're quite a fast runner. So
mhm.
that's interesting.
Yeah, so I probably had a 200-meter lead by then, and then, yeah, I pulled away from Elise. So the race essentially went, like, I would pull away from Elise, I'd fail an obstacle, catch back up, pull away from Elise, fail an obstacle, catch back up, and then, it just by the end, I had enough in the tank to kind of pull away enough to finish ahead of her at the end. So
So you used
we
your
failed.
running, thankfully.
Yeah, yeah. So I failed 3, and I think she failed 2 obstacles, so it still kind of balanced itself out. And
And this is awesome to hear because I know I'm always trying to get new people on board, as I know you would be too. And just to be able to hear that we have our top racers not nailing everything every time, that
mhm.
it's just train whatever skills you can do to make yourself the best that you can, and just go hard on that day. And you might whiff the darn bell at the end of the day.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, the race is also very different now with penalty loops.
Hmm.
I do find it's much less significant failing an obstacle now than when it was a 30 burpee penalty, and I
So
even
true.
find my mentality around failing an obstacle is different.
Hmm.
Um, you There's that extra that you really give to get through, not like Olympus,
For
for
sure.
example,
Olympus. Yeah.
where, you might be, like, falling and hanging on by the tips of your fingers, and you
Yeah.
fight through it anyways, but
Mhm.
because 30 burpees is so significant, but when it's a run loop, it's like, "Okay, oops, like, I fell." Now,
Yeah.
Olympus penalty was
It was
fairly
it was
significant.
pretty good. Yeah, I liked that
Mhm.
one. I like that because that's the hardest one. I found for me, I'm like 50-50 on that obstacle. I
Yeah,
actually did nail it, but my legs were completely burnt after doing it because I pushed really hard off the wall and try to
yeah,
conserve the energy. And I was like, should I have just gone down the hill and back? But
yeah. It is where my hips started to really, seize up, actually, pushing into, and
okay.
where my hips went into spasm, and I did
Oh no.
Olympus. Um, but yeah, so,
And it
yeah, I
just
hit my
depends on the day,
spear.
right? Like you can have your day.
Yeah,
I know you can do all the obstacles, but that's kind of, I find that exciting too, because if you're close to someone and they don't complete their obstacle, then you might be able to burn past them. But and
mhm,
also if you can break away through running and that's your skill, like, then
yeah,
you have some leeway to fail a couple of obstacles and keep
yeah.
going. So that's
I think
awesome.
the biggest thing is just to not mentally get out of it when you fail an obstacle. It's
Yeah.
really, there's so much race in Spartan racing, and one obstacle does not make or break it. And people do fail obstacles even at the top, and it's really, I mean, I would say the spear throw is still 50-50 with the elites. So when it comes down to it, like, to run a clean race is very significant. So do not count yourself out, and what your strength is really lean into that. And my strength is running.
Mhm.
And, when there's runnable sections, like, push those hard. And just, what if you fail an obstacle, be upset for your second, smash
Yeah.
your penalty loop and then get right back into it, and just do not let it ruminate in your mind that there
And
was a
that's so true. What do you say to yourself in your brain when you have whiffed the bell of the monkey bars that you've done a million times? Like, how are you correcting that? And are you negative for a long time, or do you get yourself out of that? What are you saying to yourself?
Mhm. I just say there's a lot more race, especially the monkey bars was the first one.
Oh,
So, and
yeah.
to just run yourself back, because really with a 200-meter penalty loop, you can make that kind of stuff up.
Hmm.
Um, and to just stay in it mentally, and you kind of shake it off,
Yeah.
and yeah, just stay in it, and do the penalty loop as fast as you can. So don't make it, don't add insult to injury and like mope through your penalty loop.
Yeah.
So like get it done fast, get it over with, and then when you're done it, you're back in the race and it is what it is, and then you move on. So
Yeah, it's
mm,
so up in your head, I think, especially at your level of racing. As
mm,
soon as you get into your head, you're done. Like
mm,
I know I started a thing where I've said this before. I'm now a third person talker to myself in my head, which really works because it's like some outside voice coming in going, "Okay, Jill, you're doing great, Jill. Good job, Jill." And it sounds
mhm,
ridiculous, but it actually works. So I'm always interested to hear the sports psychology, especially behind elite athletes like yourself.
mhm,
And that must be the same when you're doing the DEKAs and all of those things. Because I think I mentioned this at the beginning. Bethany is also a world champion DEKA record holder. So you've got to be saying the same thing when I know at DEKA Worlds this year, some of the girls started out really fast and keeping up to you. And you are probably, are you one of the fastest, if not the fastest girl in that race? And everyone was like, Bethany is just pacing herself. How do you keep doing
oh,
that while you're doing that? Because I know I have a problem. I see people
mhm,
go out and I'm like, okay, got to stay with the pack. But like, I've seen you do that and it's very impressive. So what are
mhm.
you saying then?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question, because that's kind of the opposite scenario, right? Is when girls go out so high. I think like I've been racing competitively since I was 14 years old. And the thing too is you have to really understand your abilities, you understand your body and your running splits. And I know what I can run, and I know to not go to the well too early. And we've done so I Heather White and I won the DECA Fit relay, and
Mhm.
the race at Worlds went out so fast.
Yeah.
Heather and I we were in seventh or eighth place going into the first station.
Hmm.
And I guess I have a lot of confidence in knowing what I'm capable of, and I have a lot of confidence in my partner and knowing what she's capable of, and I know where our strengths lie. And I also know um, the girls in my race are not
Runners like
running
you, right?
245-kilometer
No.
is not really in their realm either. So I know at some point that's not going to be their pace later in the race. So there's a confidence that kind of has to come in too, and to just know like the girls are going to come back. That race was a bit scary too, because we were still in fifth, I think, halfway through the race.
Mhm.
And every other pair had a very different race strategy than us. And we again just had to have faith that we knew where our strengths were, and to just I lost you there, was it, and to just keep like doing what we do best. And again, Heather and I, she's one of the top 5 in the world in the strong. And
Yeah.
as far as flat out running, I would say again, with my track background, like I have really a really good ability to run flat
Yeah.
very fast,
Yeah.
and to just have like total confidence in that I know at when it counts, like we're going to be able to make this up. So yeah, not panicking, because as soon as you
Hmm.
panic, you make mistakes, and you do not want to red line too early. And I think we ran probably one of the smartest races we've ever done together. So, and it came back later in the race. And yeah, I think we ended up winning by 40 seconds. So going from almost last to
Yeah.
the margin of win was just, yeah,
Like
cool. confident.
To trust in that plan is such a skill. Like that is
Mhm.
to not change course because the race is going different. That is such a skill
Mhm.
to have. But like you said, you've been racing since you were 14 years old. So who comes up with your plans for either DEKA or for Spartan racing? Are you training yourself or do you have an outside coach? How do you do that?
Yeah, this has been a bit of a thing for me since I started because so right before I started Spartan racing in 2017, and at that point I was still coached by his name is Dave Scott. So he was my high school club coach for
Oh,
track and field.
nice. Yeah.
And he's an amazing man. And then when I was shifting to Spartan, he's like, I don't really know what to do
Yeah.
anymore. And so I said, it's fine, I'll take over. So, and then in 2017, I kind of took over my own training. And then for a while, I went with Michelle Ford. I don't know if people know her name. She's a bit of an OG in the obstacle course racing world and ultra stuff. And then when I was doing more hybrid stuff, she was a little bit also like, I'm not really sure this world and, all the mix of things. So I was like, okay, like I'll figure it out. So right now I work a little bit with Lauren Weeks and Anthony and the hybrid engine.
Hmm.
So I do work with their program. I like it because of the ways you can kind of piece together what works for you. I
Sure.
try to follow it, but I also again, I am also a coach, and I know when
Yeah.
I'm leading up to different races, I will throw in different things, especially her program is very much geared towards high rocks and DEKA.
Okay. So not
And
OCR.
yeah, not OCR at all. So leading up to things like OCR, I'll add in some of my own stuff. So I like having a bit of a framework and then I move things around within that. So I'm a bit flexible. I also, at this stage in my life, I very much lead with flexibility for how I feel. So I will not follow a plan if my body is saying no. And I take down like, well, so I stick to a strict one rest day a week. And I've done that for a very long time also. It's how I think my
Yeah.
body just works
Hmm.
and being able to, week after week. Because I mean, as hybrid and OCR racers, we know we have like an 11th month racing season.
Yeah.
So
So
if
crazy.
you want to be, yeah, it is kind of ridiculous.
Hmm.
And with DEKA Worlds being like 2 weeks before Christmas, um, we're kind of
Why not?
impinging into my normal like downtime month. So yeah, I'm pretty strict about one rest day a week. And then, but yeah, I generally work with Lauren and Anthony with the hybrid athlete and then mix in a little bit of my own. So it's kind of a bit of a blend. It's just hard with the different styles of racing that I do because I still like to do OCR. I like to do Spartan. I do Hyrox. I do DEKA.
Yeah.
We do another race up here, which you've maybe heard about it, but RX1. So I like to jump into those.
I
And
just started following that. So yeah, I am
mhm.
interested in all of the things that people are doing hybrid wise. So
Yeah, yeah.
that's a
So
series too, right? But
yes, yeah. RX1 is a series based out of Quebec. So there's 5 locations. Each location has a 3 race series, and then there's a grand finale in August. So it's a very well run organization as well. So if anyone ever wants to jump into something that's kind of like long CrossFit, but
okay.
not super skill based, not super skill based, then
Yeah.
it's a fun one to try.
Oh, that's awesome. So you went straight from cross country and running to OCR to Spartans. What was your first race? When did you start?
Um, So my actual first OCR was Rugged Maniac,
Oh, nice.
which rest in peace no longer exists.
No.
So I did in 2017, I had been battling some really significant hip issues since having my daughter
Okay.
and started rock climbing. My daughter was born in 2013. And
Oh,
then yeah, hip issues. So I started rock climbing to kind of, have an outlet. And then in 2017, I saw OCR Worlds was coming to Canada. This is when OCR Worlds
yes.
was at, I was like, I don't know what this is, but that looks pretty awesome.
Sounds fun.
Yeah. And I used to race Faye Stenning. Again, if you've been around for a little bit, you might remember the name Faye
I know
Stenning.
Faye. Faye
Yeah,
was
so
actually
Faye
my coach, so
with
yeah. Yeah.
okay.
Hmm.
Yeah, so Faye and I used to race on the track. She went to the University of Calgary and I went to
That's
Western.
amazing.
And then she had made a proper career of Spartan racing. And
Mhm,
so I was like, okay, maybe I should give this a try. And then I ran a Rugged Maniac,
mhm.
which was surprisingly a qualifier for OCR, although extremely different in
For
level of,
sure.
yeah. And then I ran Brimacombe right after that.
Oh, nice. Yeah, they've been
Mhm.
around there for a long time at Brimacombe. Were you in 2017, did they have the jousting people at that point? Because
No,
okay.
I don't think I would have liked it if someone tried to hit me with a joust. I'm sorry.
I hear you. That was actually my deterrent. I know some people love the jousting and they want that back, but I didn't come in until after because I was doing Tough Mudders and different ones. I did OCR WC or that year 2016 and 17, and my qualifier was at Mud Hero. So
Wow, that was a qualifier?
it
Also,
was, yeah.
wow.
Yeah. So I think things have changed quite quite a bit
Yeah.
since then.
Yeah, that does not prepare people for OCRWC.
No, no, if
No.
anything, Spartan does and grip. How did you do in the OCRWC that year?
Oh my, I was extremely underprepared. It took me 5.5 hours to do 15K. I lost my band early. I lost a lot of the skin on my hands very early on steroid,
Oh,
what is it?
yeah.
Yeah, steroid,
So
where it was
the ladder, but it's like monkey bars, but it's
wood,
basically an A-frame of wood and it hurts
wood.
really bad.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I was just grossly underprepared, having no idea what I was getting into. It was my third or fourth OCR ever, and coming from Rugged Maniac and Spartan, just having no clue.
Mm.
I think my husband at the time almost sent a search party for me because he thought I died
Oh
because it
no.
was so long.
It's like
But yeah, when
way
I
faster than
finished,
this.
oh yeah, when I finished though, it was one of those moments where it was like, I was in complete awe of the women that
You could get
were
through it.
could get through it, and then just realizing like I've never been so challenged in my life and I wanted to get better at it, and there was so much room for improvement, obviously, and that really excited me, and then I kind of threw myself into it after that. So
And
it's funny because it was probably um at that stage in my life, the hardest thing I'd ever done, but it was so motivating for me to just throw myself into something that completely destroyed me to think about like how good could I be at this if I really put myself into it. So
And were you doing like, I know you're training because I do follow you and know what you do. Were you doing heavy weights and the things that you did then? Were you interested in the weightlifting, the CrossFit style before?
no,
Because, yeah, because you're a runner and especially
yeah,
not to age you because you're younger than myself, but even back in your day going through college, there wasn't the same strength emphasis as they're putting on racers now. So,
oh boy. Yeah, it's so interesting. Um, when I was in university, my coach at the time used to get mad at me when I would spend too much time in the weight room. And he would say things like, "You don't need our muscles to run fast." And I didn't want to look like a noodle. So I would do a little bit. But I was the only girl on the cross country track team, so in the distance crew that would ever spend, well, there was a couple of us, I shouldn't say the only, but that would spend any time in the weight room really. And it was not a priority whatsoever.
no,
So we're talking 20 years ago.
yeah.
It was different. And the coach that I had was very old school. So everything I did in the weight room was also just kind of made up from me. There was
Mhm.
no programming. I would just go down there and do really basic stuff just because I wanted to be stronger still, and I was an anomaly. So and that kind of carried on. My post collegiate coach used to say, and it's so funny that hashtag biceps wins races is a thing now, because he used to say, you don't need biceps to run. And that was one of the things that he used to say.
Yeah.
So he would used to be like, stop lifting weights. And I
You're
think
like,
as a distance runner, I am someone who gains muscle easily, which is funny
mhm,
because in this
not,
world of CrossFit, I'm so tiny and
yes.
hybrid racing, but in the distance running world, I'm not. So he used to get on me about lifting at all because he wanted me to be smaller. So I would do enough. I would do essentially injury prevention when it came
Hmm.
to lifting. And that's kind of what I did. So when I started Spartan racing, I realized I need to build strength and
Hmm.
especially upper body, which was, um, I enjoyed it though, because I felt more balanced coming from, hockey, gymnastics, and then into running, very leg strength based and just did not have upper body strength. So I threw myself into more of that when I started OCR, and it was so necessary. Even things, heavy carries used to destroy me like you
Oh, yeah.
wouldn't believe. Like a
Hmm.
farmer's carry at OCR Worlds, I don't even want to, thinking about how long one of the farmer's carries took me, like I thought I was going to die on the mountain carrying 2 sandbags. So,
And meanwhile, it's probably what you carry now just in a race it was probably less than that on each
oh yeah,
hand.
yeah, exactly. I don't even know, Um, but yeah, but again, I love where I've come from even in the last
Hmm.
while because just the strength where you could throw yourself into a lot of different things and feel like really capable. And yeah, it's been a really good learning experience in that way because the me before when it was all about running, there was so many things that I could never imagine being able to do. So
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Because it's
The
two
gym is
different
such a big,
worlds.
yeah, it is. And the gym is so important now.
And I think that's changing, and it's really great, especially from a female perspective, because even back then it was like, it wasn't as encouraged to lift heavy, and now you are seeing athlete after athlete, promoting like lift heavy stuff, just pick heavy things up and put it down, and we're really
Yeah,
celebrating that. Whereas back in your day, your coach was going, "No, you need to be small so that you can run fast,"
yeah,
but that's being completely debunked as
it
well.
is.
So,
And it's so good too because when like at that stage too, we had so many issues with women on the team, even with stress fractures and everything that there's a lot of research that's happened even in the last 20 years as far as how lifting supports bone density, and especially with aging populations, it's really one of the only ways to maintain bone density. So if women, and I say women because we deplete faster than men do on that in that area, if women are not lifting, then your bone density is over a certain age is just depleting. So you're not doing yourself any favors if you're not putting resistance on the connective tissues that attach to the bones that restore the bone density that's happening there. So it yeah, and I mean on the team that I was on, at that point again, there were so many of us where like stress fractures were even kind of part of it, which is so crazy because again, you're looking at energy, like we were all in an energy deficit and
oh
it wasn't talked about. It was,
no,
and this would be a whole other podcast in itself too, but talking
we should
about,
we should actually do a red S
yes,
topic, relative energy deficiency in
deficiency
sport. Yeah,
syndrome, yeah,
okay, that's it.
which they call it now. Yeah. When I was in school, it was called the female athlete triad.
Yeah, but now we're
Um,
seeing that men are also affected by that as well.
mhm,
It is very common for female, just the cycles and different hormone levels make things different, but it's
mhm.
also in men. So that's why it's not the female athlete triad anymore. But that
Yes,
was kind of like
exactly.
you almost wanted to be in that category back then. And now
Mhm.
it's like we know that that has long-term consequences. So the weightlifting and the running and the balance, the rest all lends itself to exactly what you're doing. So is that
Yeah.
sort of something that you decided to become a coach because to change things, to make things different for athletes?
Mhm. So I accidentally fell into this role of a coach. So I'm actually a primary school teacher.
Oh,
So when I graduated from
wow.
university, I started teaching full time. And I taught, and we lived overseas and taught. I lived in Dubai for a couple of years and I taught there. And then when I had kids, I was going to just supply teach, so teach part-time, and then I started training. I've always kind of coached a little bit on the side, but not like a paid position or anything, just helped people. And I started working with moms with babies. So I was a pre-postnatal fitness coach. And then the mom said I was working with wanted me to keep going. And then it kind of snowballed. So this was not my grand plan. So it snowballed after that. And then I start working with the same moms after they went back to work. And then we had a studio in our basement. And then the groups of people that started training with me it became bigger and bigger and bigger. And then after a couple of years, I was way too big to be working out of my basement anymore. And then I expanded and I officially left the teaching career altogether. Um, but within my gym space, the philosophies and the ethos that we work with is very much geared around creating strong, healthy bodies. It's not around weight loss programs and, biggest loser challenges and stuff like that. So,
That's
so
fair.
yeah, I think because of my background, I'm very hard lined about what we do and we don't talk about in the gym and the verbiage that we use and the kind of
Mhm.
programs that we run and stuff like that.
Yeah, I like that. I'm the exact same way. In I do not, I really like to hear stories of people doing cool stuff. I don't really care what you look like or what you're doing. It's great that you're fueling your body correctly and nicely. And it's awesome that you had some ice cream and pizza also, like the balance, but just making it all about the physical appearance, I've always found it's not as motivating for me. So it's more
Mhm.
motivating to be like, yeah, finally got the Olympus, or I finally got up the stairway to Sparta, or that kind of stuff is so interesting rather
Mhm.
than it's just not as interesting for me. I'm sure other people find that great, but I think generally as a whole, most people are looking to do something cool. And that's kind of what's coming out of fitness now. That's why I think Spartan is so awesome because it's taking everybody and giving them something they can measure, including DEKA as well. So it could be Spartan or it could be DEKA. You finish a Spartan race and you've never done anything in athletics, and now you feel pretty awesome. You do a DEKA race and then you come back and you do another one and you are 10 seconds faster and you just won. So even if you were
Mhm.
last. So those kind of things, I feel like I
Yeah.
hope that's the future anyways.
Yeah, I do too. And like you're saying, the mentality is around creating people who view themselves as athletes. And
Mhm.
it's not, we're not just athletes because we're in the competitive fields, and we're at the start lines and at the beginning. And because when you start to view yourself as an athlete, you start to take into consideration all the things that athletes do as far as fueling properly for performance and sleeping for recovery and all of that outside of just the performance standpoint or outside of what happens aesthetically,
Mhm.
which is kind of icing on the cake. It's also creating people who can find lifetime enjoyment and movement, and it has health outcomes that create longevity. And which is what I want to see is
Yeah.
people who fall in love with fitness, which I think typically also comes from people who are achieving things physically because there's a
Mhm.
different sense of satisfaction when you cross a finish line. You worked really hard to get there, and then you go back to the drawing board and you're like, how can I do this better? And
Yeah.
then you go back and you start working on these things, and there's a different sense of satisfaction than when you step on the scale and you see a new number that you didn't
Yeah.
before. It's not the same. And the athlete mentality is what I believe creates lifelong movers and people that are continually going back to the gym and trying to better themselves.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. I love that I love the inclusivity of things too. Like you were saying, I enjoy seeing people who wouldn't do something go and do something cool because it is
Mhm.
cool to watch. And I know you've seen it at Spartan or DEKA where somebody would never be included at the start line, and now they're there and they're just as excited as, say, you are coming off of a podium, you know?
Mhm.
So it's all relative. And the community, I think, is what makes it at the end of the day, too. So that's part of
Mhm.
your health and well-being as well as being involved in a community. And I think if you join Spartan or hybrid racing, you are doing all of the things that you can do to achieve better health. So I
Mhm.
love that.
Mhm.
So what I
Yeah.
have one more question to do with Brimacombe. And it's all about the competitive. So we had our first race that was the new competitive format, which takes away elite and age group, puts everybody in competitive. We still have a pro wave where our top racers go. You have to earn yourself into that wave. How did you find racing with everybody this time? Was it bigger or was it more competitive? How did you find that?
Yeah, I think this is the direction that Spartan needs to go as far as developing itself as a sport. I really liked it. So a couple years ago we switched to this where you choose elite or
Hmm.
you choose age group. Which it never made sense to me. And then what we saw happening was the elite start line started getting smaller and the age group start line started getting bigger. So people were prioritizing coming fifth or sixth in elite over winning an age group podium.
Hmm.
Understandable.
Yeah.
Um, if you're not podiuming here, but you have a chance to podium here, it could make sense. But we
Hmm.
weren't giving enough priority to what, it means to come fifth or sixth necessarily in
As
elite. So we,
exactly.
yeah, so we kind of lost that, what was happening on the elite start line.
Hmm.
So, in order for this sport to continue to grow properly, and again, you use models like road racing, triathlon, where we all start together, and then the top is the podium, and then everybody else's age group, and that's the way it is. So, the tricky part with obstacle course racing is you're coming up to obstacles where there could be bottlenecks and only so many people can hit them at
Hmm.
once. So that's where with Spartan we have to have waves and we
Yeah.
have to have start lines.
Hmm.
So this is the only part where I think Spartan might have to do a little bit of shuffling. Just because when I understand the age group racers, and when I say age group racers, there's not a really big difference between an age group racer and an elite racer,
Yeah.
unless we're
Few
talking.
minutes.
Yeah. Well, but again, there's when you're talking like the fifth or sixth who would have been elite, that's an also would
Yeah,
have
an
been a
age
different
group
age
racer.
group.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, but the deciphering factor is when you're talking about like your 55-year-old, your 60-year-old. So
Yeah.
they kind of have to figure out where do I start so I have the best chance of racing the athletes that are in my age group.
Hmm.
And that's where I think Spartan should maybe figure out a way to put them all together a little bit so you kind of have an idea of who you're racing. When you're
Yeah.
racing for the elite podium,
Hmm.
or probably that 25 to 45 age groups, and
Hmm.
you're starting in the first or second pace group, you're probably racing the people that you're going to essentially be racing
Yes.
for your podiums.
Hmm.
But it's after that, I think, where it gets a little bit confusing. So I
Yeah.
do to get back to your question, I think what they're doing right now is important and it's essential to the sport to becoming more valid and more legitimate as a sport so that we don't lose the elite side of things. And then where the age group is the proper age group podiums. So
Yeah.
that fourth place person does win their age group because I think
Yeah.
that's what we've missed out on before. That
Hmm.
fourth place person in elite deserves their age group podium.
Yeah.
So this is the way that things needed to go.
Yeah, I loved that, seeing people who have been competing in elite for a while, and sometimes they are top three, sometimes they're top five, and then seeing them win their age group. That was great. A
Yeah,
couple of the racers. So you should go home with something at that level. And
yeah,
then also it was kind of fun for everybody else to see where they kind of sat on in the whole podium. So that was kind of interesting too. Maybe we need a masters category or something, but where does that start? Because some of the
right.
we've got 40-year-olds who come into the top three, and you know what I mean? Like, so where do we Put that.
Yeah, like I'm 40 in a couple
Yeah.
6 months. Yeah, so I mean the track world's masters is 35, the road racing world it's 40.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Maybe
It,
we raise it a little bit, maybe make it
45.
45, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, I'd be
But
good with
yeah,
that.
yeah, maybe that would solve that problem. I think I liked the format for sure, but it's good to hear from someone like yourself.
Mhm.
Did you find it more competitive?
I mean at the top it was kind of the same girls,
Same
right?
people.
Yeah. So, it was kind of Elise and I back and forth. So it would have been
Yeah,
Elise and I back and forth regardless. But
that's
there
true.
was more people on the start line, which
Mhm.
just felt a little bit better than,
Yeah,
10 girls, sitting on our lonesome, like doing the ruse.
I know. And it kind of pushes people who weren't going to do that too into elite or and who knows how that'll go. I
Yeah.
mean, just off the top of my head, thinking of Chelsea Grant, who's kind of come into the OCR or DEKA space, the hybrid space, and trying her first Spartan race
Mhm.
and getting a top 10 in the 5K. So, you know, would she have picked elite or age group? So that's neat to see too. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think there will be
Yeah.
a lot of interesting things. I hope that is very competitive for you this season. What's your next race? What's your next Spartan brand race coming up? What are you looking at?
Yeah, I don't know what else I'm doing necessarily with Spartan. I am, well, brand, as far
Mhm.
as the brand is concerned, I'm doing the
Okay.
Duck
Oh, nice.
in Fort Wayne coming up.
Mhm.
A little bit scared of that, but that's okay. We do things that are scary to us.
Absolutely.
Mhm. And so, yeah, so there's some trail races
Mhm.
coming up. I'm going to Denver for the Vail Mountain Games, and then I'm going to come back and then the DEKA Ultra. So, and then a little bit
Okay.
of more DEKA stuff in the summer. Yeah, and then High Rocks Toronto in October, which I'm super excited about. So after that, like I'll probably do Blue Mountain. So Blue
Nice.
Mountain is also, I mean, it's such a beautiful course. It's one of the best ones, I think, as far as atmosphere, and it's October in
Mhm.
Ontario, which is so beautiful. So, yeah, that's kind of my season. Like if I can sneak up for another RX1 in Quebec, I love those as well. Yeah, I kind of bit of a mixed bag.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing what you do this year. Looking forward in both OCR and hybrid. And with that, I will wish you an awesome season. And we hope to have you back again to talk about some more races as the season goes on.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.